All right, let's talk about the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are a team that going into this year, it looked like there's, some good progress on the team. They had some good players all around the ball, brought in some strong guys and like players like James Daniels to the team who had a great year last year, but kind of a shockwave hit the NFL today or over the last few days when Chris Greer, the GM, came out and talked about the potential of going to trade Jalen Ramsey. I think this is an interesting move, but we have some data, some insights here that this could be a lot better for the Dolphins than people think it may be. A lot of people might be panicking. Jalen Ramsey, your top corner, is going elsewhere or potentially going elsewhere. But I think there's a lot of stuff signaling that this may be the right move for the Dolphins. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, let's jump right into it. For anyone who hasn't heard, I'll briefly go through the story talking about what exactly is going on with the Dolphins. This is from over on NBC Sports. It says, Greer, talking about GM Greer, noted that while Ramsey did not request a trade, nor did he want a contract adjustment, the team and the player eventually agreed that a trade would be best for both parties. Greer also said that there were a couple weeks of discussions between Miami and Ramsey's representation. Because I will say these decisions aren't done quickly and they're not taken lightly because we've spent a lot of time this offseason working through this, talking through things, Greer said. At the end of the day, Jalen did not ask for a trade, so we went through the process and felt after numerous conversations and then talking last week with Jalen and his agent that it is best to move forward and it's in the best interest for the Dolphins and Jalen Ramsey. I think this is really interesting how this was worded. Kind of seeing that, Jalen Ramsey didn't necessarily want to leave, but the Dolphins and Chris Greer really kind of pushing for that trade in my eyes. And I have some data to kind of back this up. So the first graph I'm going to pull up here just kind of shows Jalen Ramsey 2021, 2022 with the Rams, and then what's going on in 2023, 2024 with the Dolphins. As we see over on the Rams, everyone knows coming off his tenure with his Rams his last 2 years, he was an elite player, all pro level player, mid 80, 85 overall defensive grade here. And you can see the Rams 2021, 2022 is on the left. The Dolphin stats 2023, 2024 is on the right. And it goes in order from defensive grade, coverage grade, and run defense grade. So Rams in that overall grade, about an 85. In his coverage grade average over those 2 years, about an 81 with the Rams. Then in that his overall run defense grade, really high, about an 89 run defense grade in his tenure with the Rams. Now gets traded, comes over to the Dolphins the last few years. Pretty big dip in production here, a 71 overall grade, going from 85 to 71 over the last 2 years with the Dolphins. Below that, below 70, about a 68 coverage grade overall for Ramsey. Pretty big drop off from over 80. Then his run defense grade, not bad, but still not where it was, about a 75 run defense grade overall the last 2 years. We all know there's an injury, but this past season, he just wasn't really that good. Then finally, just looking at some other things, I think his contract has a big part to play in all of this as well. As we can see, the chart I have up on the screen, Ramsey's deal was lower in 2024. It's getting a bit bigger in 2025, but 2026 through 2028, there's going to be some massive pay days for Ramsey, some big cap hits coming down the stretch for him. So what does this all mean? I think when you break it down, Chris Greer and the Dolphins are saying, hey, we know Jalen Ramsey. He was a great player when he's with the Rams, but we're seeing the writing on the wall. Slight dips in production. I know he's still a big name player. People love him, but it's undeniable. There's been a dip in production the last 2 years, and he's about to be owed a lot of money. So if the Dolphins can move off of Jalen Ramsey now and really get another team to go buy in, he may have another year, maybe 2 years left under his belt where he still plays at a pretty high level. But I think now is the best time, and it makes the most sense for the Dolphins to move off of him before it's too far gone and it won't be able to get top dollar for this trade. Curious what your thoughts are on all of this, Nick. I've gone through my piece, but before we get to you, Dolphins fans, in the comment section below, I kind of given you a little bit of insight on what I think here of why the Dolphins may be wanting to move off of Jalen Ramsey, but let us know, what is your feelings on this? Do you think deep down it makes sense to move off of Ramsey to try to trade him elsewhere? Do you think you're confused? You don't really know how to feel? Or do you think that this is a horrible move and the Dolphins are just going to, screw things up once again? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest out of Miami?
So first and foremost, anytime you're trying to make a deal, whether it's a trade or otherwise, it's all about establishing a marketplace. Is there a demand for what you're trying to sell? Is there a demand for Jalen Ramsey? And the reality is there most certainly is. And I know some Dolphins fans may be like, well, his numbers have dipped. He's getting older. His cap hit is up there. The reality is, if you look across the rest of the NFL, there are a lot of teams, pseudo contenders, teams that are close to being contenders, and teams that are contenders that have cap space and really have the need for a veteran experienced player to slide into a role that will, in their minds, push them deep into a Super Bowl opportunity. In fact, we've got a tweet that came out recently after the news broke that the Dolphins were going to trade Jalen Ramsey, and we want to throw it up on the screen here. This is Clarence Hill, really good reporter following the Dallas Cowboys. He's a really in-the-know guy. He's not like a kind of random blogger guy, really knows his stuff. And what he tweeted, and you can see it on the screen there, is should the Cowboys give up a fourth-round pick for an aging Ramsey and that $21 million salary? Why not? They have the money and can get more cap roll with the coming Parsons extension. So what you're seeing there is that even though everyone knows that Ramsey's expensive, even though everyone knows he's older and he's not as good as he once was, there is clearly still a demand for it. In fact, let's go ahead and throw up this next graph here. This is courtesy of overthecap.com, and this is just the top remaining teams ranked in terms of cap space. You can see the New England Patriots right there at the top of the list. And if you go down this list here, it's very, very interesting. There's a lot of contenders. You're starting with the Detroit Lions. They've got $42 million. You saw the Cowboys. The 49ers think they're still contenders. The Raiders are making moves like they're trying to be contenders. The Seahawks, Cardinals, Packers, Buccaneers, Steelers, Chargers are all teams that think they're playoff teams or teams that can make a run at it, and some of them, and they're probably right that they are playoff teams. You got the Commanders at the bottom. You got the Jaguars and Saints, two teams that probably aren't contenders but think they are. The reality is all these teams have the cap space to add Jalen Ramsey into the fold and are more than willing to give up, in my opinion, a third or fourth round pick for a guy like Ramsey. Now, does it mean there's all these teams are going to call the Dolphins and try and trade for Ramsey? Not necessarily, of course. Other teams have higher priority needs that they're going to use that they have to address before they go to cornerback. But I think there definitely will be a market for Jalen Ramsey, and it will be a very robust one. Because what we've seen over the past 10, 15, and really 20 years or so is that veteran players win championships. As much as people like the idea of a rookie and a young guy coming out of nowhere carrying a team, the reality is, if you look at the Patriots dynasty, the Chiefs run of it, the 49ers making deep playoff pushes and Super Bowl appearances, even the Eagles title where they had some rookies and step up, it was a veteran offensive line. It was a veteran receiving group. It was veterans in the secondary paired with some rookies, veteran guys up front paired with some young guys, right? They were a very veteran team in the most important positions, and they had a quarterback who, even though he's a younger player, plays like he's 45 years old in terms of his maturity. Veterans win titles. And if you're a team that thinks you're a contender right now, you want to look at going in, if you have a need for corner, you're going into the draft saying, listen, do we want to risk our championship window, what we think is a championship window, on a second-round corner who played for Tulsa last year, who's going to now have to cover A.J. Brown one-on-one, twice a year, or is going to have to cover Justin Jefferson in a playoff game or something like that? That's a big risk. And we saw that actually blow up for a team like the Detroit Lions. They had some injuries. They had to rely on some young guys at the cornerback position. It didn't work out for them. They got smoked at home by Washington. I think a team like the Lions or maybe some other contenders look at Jalen Ramsey and say he is sort of a risk mitigation approach. We can bring in a veteran. Even though he's not as good as he once was in these big matchups, he can still step up. In fact, he proved it last year in the Buffalo Bills matchup, I think in week 9, he actually graded out 90 overall in terms of coverage grade. Buffalo Bills, obviously a good team, playoff team year in and year out. So Ramsey still has the ability to step up and be a big-time performer. I think a lot of other teams will recognize that, and there will definitely be a robust market for Jalen Ramsey. It may not show up till draft night itself. It may not show up till day 3 on the draft, but I think the Dolphins definitely will be able to trade Jalen Ramsey and get something in return. There is a market for this guy. But that brings me to one final point, and I'm curious what your thought is on this, Mai, specifically. If you look at cornerback spending in terms of what it leads to success in the NFL, there really is just no logical rhyme or reason to it. So if you look at the teams that spent the top 5 at cornerback last year, according to overthecap.com, they averaged out to 8.2 wins, right? Perfectly mediocre. There were some great teams, there were some bad teams, there were some average teams. Spending a lot at corner has no ramification one way or the other, no correlation, no causation, nothing to winning in the NFL. So if you're the Dolphins and you're trying to figure out where you need to allocate dollars, I think throwing money at the cornerback position would be the wrong approach to take. I think it's better that they're offloading dollars at corner, because right now there is no correlation between spending at corner and winning. Spending at quarterback and winning, there's correlation. Offensive line, defensive line, there's correlation. Corner, not so much. I think the Dolphins are taking the right approach. They've done it this offseason in terms of their secondary in general, saving some money with some lower cost options. And I think they're trying to take the same approach here with Jalen Ramsey, trading him. And I think it's the right move for the short, medium, and long term.
Yeah, Nick, and I think what you say there is kind of interesting. Nowadays, we used to think elite lockdown corner is the way of the future. Like, that is, you pass rusher, elite lockdown corners, that's what you need on defense to control, games, to really get to be a championship team. But now with the revolution of teams being, more run heavy, we've seen some of the better teams develop into these teams that have strong run games. Really, you gotta have to have a thought process of what is going to be the way, how are we going to jump forward and really continue on to be a really strong team. And I'm thinking corner might be the way of the old running back, where you kind of draft a good rookie corner. Hopefully they help you out for a couple of years. Maybe you give them their first contract, but after that, it has diminishing returns. Like you said, the teams that are spending buku dollars on corners nowadays, it really isn't all it's cracked up to be anymore. So I think this is interesting, and I think this is a good move for the Dolphins in that respect. And I think Greer's comments on this really show that he believes, and that's kind of the way they're going for, because I think he says something at the end of this article that was very interesting. He said, Ramsey, great player, probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but for the Miami Dolphins going forward, it helps us to have our best chance to win not only this year, but in the future as well. So I think he's thinking money better spent elsewhere. There's other dollars that could be allocated on this team if they could get out of Ramsey's contract, which I think would free up like almost $20 million for them this year alone to really go out and do some things with that. This Dolphins team thinks spending so top dollar on corner isn't maybe really the right decision here, not the right move going forward. And I think, like you said, the stats are kind of showing it. It leads to a little bit of mediocrity. There's not teams that are, busting out really huge win games with having a super highly paid corner. So this could be something, there could be something to that. And I really think the Dolphins are on top of this one, but there's got to be something they have planned here showing that they've realized Ramsey isn't the future of this team. They're wanting to trade him, and I think overall this would be a good play for the Dolphins.
And one final point to end on here, and Dolphins fans, I think this is important to pay attention to. Based on Jalen Ramsey's contract structure, the savings for Miami this year are predicated on Jalen Ramsey being designated a post-June 1st trade. What does that mean? It means there's a decent likelihood that the picks the Dolphins get in return are not for the 2025 draft that's right around the corner, but for future drafts. So pay attention to that. In all likelihood, Jalen Ramsey won't be traded for a second or third round pick or fourth round pick this year. It'll be a package in 2026 and beyond. And look, I know right now everyone's focused on this draft, but thinking long term and medium term, the Dolphins have struggled with that in the past, and I'm glad to see that we're seeing some smart moves in the leadership addressing that issue.